every Christian should experience some level of suffering for the gospel. You suffer your salvation, right? And it's different in every
I'm
context.
sorry. The drive up to the drive-in window at McDonald's and they take 30 seconds longer than you think they should and you get mad, that is not suffering.
Yeah. But I would say, family members who challenge your belief, different things, that's not persecution per se. We should suffer the gospel.
Right.
But there's a big difference between suffering our belief, suffering our gospel, suffering our yes, suffering our salvation, taking up our cross and following Christ. There is a difference between suffering and persecution.
Absolutely.
They're intrinsically tied. You can't be persecuted without suffering. Welcome back to the Gateway to Mercy podcast. Riaan, Britt Hancock. So good to have you join us this morning. Our topic today is going to be it's going to feel a little bit somber, but it's a necessary topic that we feel we need to talk about, and that is the whole concept of persecution, the theology of persecution, the reality of persecution, certainly for missionaries, but just for the church globally. And we're well aware, we have the privilege of living in the United States where persecution is certainly mitigated and minimized, but we have to be aware of what is going on around the world with our brothers and our sisters and the cost of serving the Lord. That is a biblical mandate, to lay down our cross, to follow Jesus, identifying with a cross that we bear. In our lives, there are levels of persecution. And I know it might look different in the United States than it does anywhere else, but I think it's healthy and necessary to have this conversation about persecution. And Britt, I'm actually going to ask you to lean mostly into this topic because you've been frontline for the majority of your life. And you've seen all levels of persecution, everything from just persecution that new missionaries feel just eating food they don't like and they're not used to, and affecting their system. Some people call that persecution, all the way to actually surrendering your life unto death. And I just want to read this. This is from the World Watch List. More than 380 million Christians suffer high levels of persecution and discrimination for their faith every year. 1 in 7 Christians are persecuted worldwide. 1 in 5 are persecuted in Africa. 2 in 5 Christians are persecuted in Asia. Last year, 4,500 Christians were murdered. 7,700 about churches and Christian properties were attacked, and almost 5,000 Christians were imprisoned. And you can go to World Watch List and download all the statistics there. This is real, and I believe we need to be aware. We need to be educated. We don't have the right or the privilege to distance ourselves from the reality of what the church is going through. We need to pray for the church. We need to support the church. We need to come alongside those who suffer for the gospel. And we need to acquaint ourselves with human suffering for the sake of the gospel. So, Britt, you labored in some pretty treacherous terrain, raising up missionaries, people willing to say yes to Jesus, coming to Mexico, working in the mountains in some pretty difficult conditions, and not just people, but your own family. I mean, you raised a family on the field. I would love to just lean in and let you just kind of speak from the heart on whatever the Lord brings to your mind on this topic of suffering and persecution and the theology of suffering.
Yeah, it is a big subject. You can't read the Bible and not see that the enemy, the spirit of Antichrist, the forces of darkness that oppose God and what God wants to do are very active and have been very active since the beginning. And in the New Testament, if you read the narrative of the New Testament, like particularly the book of Acts, and it lays out that here are the facts: obedience to God particularly bold obedience to God. And I'm not talking about being reckless. There are people out there who sort of romanticize. Usually they're the ones who hadn't hadn't had any real boogers get after them. They kind of romanticize and want to sort of kind of do something dumb or unwise to cause something adventurous, or so that they can kind of claim, hey, I'm edgy, I live on the edge, I do the real gospel kind of attitude.
Sure.
You've probably run into
Yep.
guys like that. But there's plenty of resistance without having to try to fabricate any. Number one, and Jesus speaks about persecution, and his instructions are to flee. It's very interesting, and then Paul was put in a basket and let down the wall because he stirred up controversy everywhere he went. It's like people. I've heard people say, "Wow, I want to be like Paul." Well, do you want to stir riots and and get stoned and make everybody all the way around you mad, based on just opening your mouth or writing letters or whatever? He fled persecution, he fled stress, he fled danger, but he also got up and walked back into danger. They stoned him, drug him outside the city, left him for dead. Jesus raised him up. He got back up and walked straight back into the place that they just, where he caused a riot or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's some conundrums associated with this, because the Spirit of God compelled him to go to Jerusalem, but also the Spirit of God caused prophets to rise up and prophesy that he shouldn't go. And then there were people trying to keep him from going because he was going into known danger. And he does reveal by saying, listen, I've settled my yes. I've settled this issue. I know I'm going to die for the gospel. It's like we make these decisions where we think about these things. And he had a particular narrative in his life where the Holy Spirit was kind of telling him and warning him that everywhere he goes, beatings and persecution awaited him. And so I don't think he particularly probably got off on that or wanted to do that. There was something else going on inside him that caused him to push into the pressure. Sometimes he tried to get out of the pressure, but sometimes it just comes on you and there's nothing you can do about it. And I think, that with the statistics you just read right now, and if you follow persecution.org or Voice of the Martyrs or any of those things that kind of focus on, hey, the church is persecuted now, people are being persecuted, and it takes all kinds of forms, but there are probably more people being tortured and killed for the cause of Christ around the world right now today than ever in the history of the church.
Absolutely.
And
no doubt.
And so a lot of people are like, well, don't do anything to don't be unwise. Don't do anything to upset the apple cart. It's like us, this situation that we had in Nicaragua. I've had people that love Jesus. They're sound leaders, but they want to be respectful, but they look at me and kind of go, crusades. I was like kind of going, Britt, why are you doing mass evangelism meetings? Like, number one, you've never done that. That's like this high profile, duh. That's going to create problems. In Nicaragua, of all places, it's under tension. It's been in this cycle since 2018 of they're trying to figure their thing out, and it's been getting more and more repressive and going down the track more and more toward, an ideology that is anti-freedom. Yeah. Let's put it that way, communism. And they're trying to figure their things out, and there's a robust evangelical Christian body or community. A large percentage of the country is is evangelical, like maybe around 40%. But something's been happening since 2018 that's clamping down on that, and now full scale persecution and violation of human rights and religious freedom is in operation there. And a lot of people, they're kind of not caught up with what's happening in that particular country. And the Lord asked us to do some things. Like, I was like, I've never done this, Lord.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, here's the difficult. You've said so much already. Like, we look at the life of Paul. He didn't look
No, he didn't.
for it, but
He wasn't looking for it.
Yeah.
He was trying to follow and execute in obedience his yes to Jesus.
yeah, and we're not saying, you're not a Christian if you don't go and find trouble. That's not what we're saying. But we
No.
are saying obedience to Jesus
Creates trouble.
creates trouble, right? And
Period.
and you have to have wisdom to sometimes say, I got to push through this moment. But the biblical narrative also paints a very clear picture. Flee from it, right?
Yes,
Don't
it
just
does.
stay in it for the sake of staying in it and proving some badge of honor. It's not a badge of honor
No.
to be persecuted for the sake of persecution. Christ does not want us to suffer unnecessarily.
No, he doesn't. But it is hard baked into the gospel.
Correct.
The response, it's like such a common diet, so to speak, a common feature or fixture, and people go, well, yeah, but that was during the Roman Empire, and that was, and we've progressed, society's progressed beyond that. Well, if that's what you think, you're living in a pretty small bubble.
Correct.
You've probably not gotten out. You need to get out into the rest of the world and understand some dynamics, because it's just like you mentioned us raising kids on the mission field. And persecution, let's frame persecution this way. The pressure that and stress and less than peaceful or optimum dynamics that exist based on saying yes to Jesus. Okay, so it's like us. We said yes to Jesus. We were first missionaries in Paraguay. Our youngest son was born there. Then we left Paraguay and we went through language training, because we were there really to help this missionary, but we didn't know the language, and so our effectiveness was limited. But that started our journey. We were there for 6 months, and then we came out. We went to language school. Well, my wife learned Spanish, not me. And it took me a long time to learn Spanish on the field, but we ended up moving to Mexico full time in 1997, and we took our 4 kids and we had them with us, and you just immediately know the differences. Number one, you're foreigners and you don't have the rights as citizens. Well, that creates open pathways for pressure against you, and there's anti-American sentiment, and there's all these assumptions and stereotypes out there, and then one really poignant sort of weight or price involved with saying yes to Jesus is we couldn't let our kids play in the neighborhood with other kids, so they grew up with a slow trajectory for learning Spanish.
Mm.
Well, the reason is because child exploitation and trafficking was so bad in the town where we lived that 2 or 3 children every single week were disappearing out of the market.
And gringos
And
become a higher target.
Yeah, we stand out like a light bulb, and there's all these things that if you don't know about the human trafficking in Mexico and abduction and kidnapping and all the things, just go. You got your AI search engines, just go out there and ask questions and you'll find out.
Yeah.
Mexico's #1 in the world for kidnapping.
But I think,
And-
and not to derail, because I want you to continue, but I think just that little snippet of what you said, go actually ask the question on AI. Just educate
Yes.
yourself a little bit.
Ask Grok or Chat GPT or whatever your favorite AI thing is, start asking questions. If you wonder, you should wonder. Maybe talking about this, there are attitudes out there that it's like people who live and work in circumstances that are hard in the gospel. They will tell you, well, the church can't be healthy except where there's persecution. Right? That's one extreme. I don't agree with that. But it happens to often be the case because you really have to settle your decisions.
Correct.
Right? And it's not that under blessing and prosperity, it's impossible to settle your decision for Jesus and live with intentionality and live in a surrendered way. It's just there's so many layers of reasons that make it easy not to do that.
Yeah.
You got to push against serious pressure of danger for your life. And so the reliability of the ones who call themselves Christians where they're persecuted probably is a lot higher than the vast percentage of people who are church attenders who are not intentional, and they're not pushing against the pressure of blessing, which is just as dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? And so it sets up this thing, and then you have other people that don't want that they're kind of their heads in the sand. They love Jesus and they don't know what's going on in the world. And they think, well, you did something wrong if something negative or stressful or persecution happens.
Yeah, the enemy.
Those are two extremes.
Yeah, the enemy is coming against you because they're sending your life or something.
Or is he coming against you because you were stupid? Like in our case, we knew that was going to happen to you. Number one, those things are not helpful. And
I
promise,
for the encouragement.
This is not encouraging because you're dealing with all the things, and we can get into that later. But what I'm saying is persecution comes in many forms. The wrestling and I wish it weren't like this. I wish my kids had been able to play in the neighborhood with other kids and they would have learned Spanish really fast. What does that set up? Now they almost all of them know Spanish now, some better than others. But the ones that really, really know Spanish well, two of them had to go to school to learn. Yeah. I've got my daughter's a certified translator. Well, she went to school for that, and they had friends over time, but they were like teenagers before and they didn't learn it by going out. They learned it by us having friends that we had a focus to bring into the house. But the boys didn't have that so much. And so now Jacob is now grown. You heard him, on a previous podcast, talk about going to language school with his wife. She needed to learn, and he needed to get much better in his Spanish as an adult. And people, we would come back from on itineration their whole life, and they would get kind of awkward questions like, I don't know how to answer this, and it makes them feel bad. Like, why don't I know Spanish already?
Yeah.
When that's a form of, you're paying the price of, there's nothing they can say to explain and give everybody context for why is that. That's one level of persecution and pressure.
That's a completely different take. I think we've never really talked about this, that the church and fellow believers unintentionally, without paying acute attention to what they say and how they say it, can exert persecution on missionaries and those who do the work with their ignorance and insensitivity.
It's unintentional.
But it is a form of being persecuted by your own people.
Realize,
right?
You don't realize what's going on and the things that get said, and then it polarizes. We've talked about this many times, the difference between, the local church and the mission church. Well, the same dynamics exist. Missionaries between those people back home, friends and families, they don't know. It's like not knowing what to say to someone who loses a loved one. There's kind of that awkward thing. It's not exactly the same, but it's like, how do we relate? Or we're not really thinking about the fact that we don't realize how sometimes the slightest things can explode the the most powerful dynamics emotionally inside people who are who've left home and are following Jesus, and it creates weight,
So even though
in a multiplicity of ways.
so even though persecution and suffering are intrinsically tied together, how would you delineate between the two?
Well, there's many forms of suffering, like the heat like living in the heat or living in a different climate can be can create an environment that you just have to learn that creates a hardship.
Yeah.
So it's like in the top 5 reasons why missionaries don't follow through with a lifelong commitment to stay on the field. Hardship is in the top 5. Okay, so hardship can be everything from emotional hardship, watching social media and seeing all the birthday parties for the family and the friends that you're missing or that your kids are missing. Mm-hmm. Or this is a big one. If your kids grow up on the mission field, you deal with this thing of from the standpoint of nostalgia, wanting your kids to have the positive experiences that you did, and you feel bad for them, and they don't even know what they're missing. Or then they have a window into the world now, and they see because everybody's talking and social media and everybody's doing the thing, and then it stirs this. I'm missing out. I'm paying a price. It's turning into discontent. A missionary kid who wants to play football, or a missionary kid who wants to do ballet, or whatever. Those are very real, like sort of soft consequences for let's call it, that fall into what hardship means. There's physical hardships. There's everything from, the electricity is not reliable. Like we had a Coke truck turn down the street in 2003 from this place we just moved. It tore down the power lines, and it was 3 weeks before they got it fixed. Well, I mean, yeah, so what? Let's just put up with it. But that creates a hardship.
Yeah, I mean,
and that is like a soft, sort of low grade form of suffering. It creates irritations. I can promise, if it's hot and you don't have a fan, any way to cool off, you are irritated.
Listen, we lose 30 minutes of power in the United States, and it's suffering.
We moved on to the mission field.
Never mind 3 weeks.
We moved on to the mission field. We had one small truckload of stuff. And so we had like this old rickety card table and some plastic trunks. And some waterbed, things that we built some boards around. And that's all we had in our house. And there was no electricity and no running water for 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. And I couldn't speak Spanish enough to figure out, okay, where do I go? How do I even find the electric company? What does it look like here? And we had other missionaries that helped us, and we had to find an albañil is called, a cement worker to come put up a cement pole so that the power company can come and put the meter in, and that took days to get that done. And then my wife's washing clothes by hand, and it's like, okay, well, welcome to the mission field. There's a lot of people that deal with other things that are worse, and some people not so worse. But what I'm saying is the composite of things can set up a degree of suffering, which is hardship.
But I believe every
that
Christian,
factors.
Every Christian should experience some level of suffering for the gospel. You suffer your salvation, right? And it's different in every
I'm sorry. The drive up to the drive-in window at McDonald's and they take 30 seconds longer than you think they should, and you get mad. That is not suffering.
Yeah. But I would say, family members who challenge your belief, different things, that's not persecution per se. We should suffer the gospel.
Right.
But there's a big difference between suffering our belief, suffering our gospel, suffering our suffering our salvation, taking up our cross and following Christ. There is a difference between suffering and persecution.
Absolutely.
They're intrinsically tied. You can't be
Yep.
persecuted without suffering.
Hiking like in our case, we've all kinds of things. Hiking for 14 hours to a village and having blisters or bloody blisters, that's suffering.
Correct.
Dealing with food that is not normal and it's hard for you to eat, that you gotta like grab things and apply things, and those things, all those little things build up to dismantle people emotionally, families. It creates stress, and so all those things, it's such a big subject. But persecution is when you get intentional resistance because of the gospel, and you represent Jesus.
Yeah.
Right. And so in our context, we've been working in all these small villages in Mexico and Nicaragua and other places in Central America. And usually the first thing that happens is in the village context where we were, it would start off as this criticizing pressure from the rest of the people in the village. Well, we think, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, that's not true, number one. And when you live in a village context, it takes the entire village for you to be able to live. Like it's a life threat and increase an excruciatingly difficult life that much more, because then they get into these cycles where there's normal pathways where the ladies go to the spot in the spring or at the river or at the creek to wash. All of a sudden, they find themselves unable to go to that spot, which the jungle pathways have been vetted. There's commerce going back and forth. There's less concern with wild animals and snakes and all the things. There's community protection, so to speak, because there's all this hostility in the environment around them. And now they suddenly find themselves, they can't wash at the wash spot, so they have to go to another place that increases their risk and their danger.
Yeah.
Or the critical nature of what it means to be the gospel. I knew a senior leader years ago in Mexico who got saved, became a preacher in the network of churches that we were working in, and the Roman Catholics there, which that's what everybody is, very hostile form of Catholicism to the gospel. That whole cycle started. Well, this man became a pastor. He was a church planter, and he rode around on this bicycle, and he would go from church to church as he was cultivating his congregations. And he had a heart attack, and he fell over. He's going through this village where it was in his area. He fell over while he was having this heart attack and was in the ditch on the side of the road. And the people were just walking by going, that's what you get.
Mm.
And nobody helped him.
No compassion,
no response. It's like, yay, see there. You're not an idolater anymore, and that's God doing that to you, or whatever. All these things, all the way to I know people, and in the work that we're working, we've had multiple people martyred, and particularly poignant, aggressive, violent instances of persecution in the state of Chiapas. If you don't know about Chiapas, Mexico, you should. And one of our missionary colleagues went there, opened up a pretty incredible work, but there were at one time 30,000 Christian refugees outside San Cristobal de las Casas, all set up in the pasture, and they were all fleeing persecution because they had converted to Christianity.
Yeah.
They had all gotten born again. and there's this all this hostility against it. And then we had a missionary go in and start working among those people. And there is a town right now that missionary purchased this land to resettle severely persecuted Christians because they would rape their wives if they got saved. They would kill them. They would burn them, try to burn them alive. They would, we had pastors and leaders that the mobs would rise up and they would descend on the church. That it's like one or two people get saved and they're making a disciple, and the pressure and the persecution starts. But people start getting saved because the power of God and like the real gospel starts happening, miracle starts happening. People start responding, get up to about 30 people, and 150 people would rise up and come and mob them, destroy their crops, burn their huts, rape their wives, kill them, run them out of town. It's like for years and years. And there's an entire town right now that our former colleague purchased and helped start resettling all these people he was winning to Jesus. Right? Where? Not on the other side of the world. Not in Nigeria, not to take away anything that's happening anywhere else, but people don't realize that our neighbors, Mexico, it's like right next door. You can drive there in a few hours. We worked 12 hours south of the border. We started working 8 hours south of the border. We've had people martyred and beaten and thrown in jail, and all these little bitty tiny villages, and nobody knows it's happening.
But I think, Britt, the reason I think it's important for us to have this conversation is sometimes we allow different things, politics, whatever, to rob us of compassion for our brothers and sisters in Christ. We would rather, I think Cameron said it yesterday, and how did he say it? He said, you would rather align with someone who's a non-believer but politically aligned with you than align with a believer who's not politically aligned.
I think he said identify more with a non-believer and whatever your political party is, more than you can identify with a brother or sister in Christ in another culture somewhere on the other side of the world, or even next door in this case.
Yeah, and so I think it is for us to become healthy believers, it is incumbent upon us to acquaint ourselves with the suffering of our brothers and sisters. And how do we pray for them? How do we come alongside? How do we encourage them? Suffering is systemic to all of us. All of us will have some level of suffering somewhere as we follow Christ. But persecution is not necessarily systemic to everyone.
No, it's not.
Persecution is a targeted, calculated effort to oppose the very work of Christ that you're trying to do.
Yeah, suffering is probably general. It's just going to come in multiple ways. But persecution, like you said, is where your yes to Jesus and the following the Lord and doing what Jesus is saying for you to do to the best of your ability causes you to be targeted. And ultimately, it's the spirit of Antichrist that hates God that is the reason for that happening. But that would be the two differences, and they oftentimes go together. It's not like, well, for us, we lived under the specter. We had to learn how to think, learn how to live, learn how to be alert, learn how to, we did all kinds of things because we lived in an environment that at any moment persecution could explode, and you don't ever get warning, hardly. Sometimes you do, You have a network of believers, and they know things are going south, and they'll say, you probably shouldn't come right now, or things are hot right now, and we change our behavior. But one of the things that we did is we never broadcast our schedule.
Yeah.
We, in our churches, they were established and they do church on the regular days, Sunday, Wednesday, or whatever, there was an established pattern. But one of the things that we did to deal with persecution and to mute or mitigate, to be obedience to advance the gospel into those areas. Some people think, well, you shouldn't do that. Except Jesus was saying, go into all the world.
But I think it comes back to what you said initially, that Paul flees persecution sometimes, right?
But the point is,
he doesn't flee suffering.
He was in place out of his yes. He went into danger multiple times, and stuff happened, and he responded to the best way that he could. And like what we did to mitigate, try to mute, try to be wise and try to be obedient, but also in this learning curve is we just established no regular patterns.
Yeah.
Like the principle is, don't go and come the same way. Don't go and come the same time of day. Don't make it harder for the bad guys, so to speak. Make it harder for them to lay plans to trap you or to do whatever it is, to kill you or whatever they're going to do. I've found out so many stories where, I'll be in a meeting somewhere. It happens not all the time, but it happens with some degree of regularity. I'll be in some setting in a meeting somewhere in Mexico, and somebody will walk up to me, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm so-and-so's brother, cousin, whatever. I love Jesus. Oh, this is awesome, and they're telling me their Jesus story, and then they're saying, oh, yeah, 3 times I was hiding in the jungle when I heard your truck coming. You got out with your family, and I had you in my rifle sights, but there was this big giant guy walking with you that scared the daylights out of me, or I don't know why I didn't pull the trigger or whatever. And then, it's all kinds of things like that. But then there are the times where you're doing your best to be obedient, and there's no amount of wisdom or learning how to live in yellow thinking or whatever, staying on alert all the time, and it's not very restful and all the things, and you make adjustments for what you do with your kids and how you handle your kids. And one of the most stressful things for me early in in being in Mexico was when we had to go to the market to buy food, because I couldn't leave my kids at home. They were all little bitty, and there's 50, 60, 70,000 people all crammed into this space and milling around, and it's hot and it's just going and coming, and it was from that market that the kids were disappearing, and so you just know,
high alert.
It's like high alert, and you don't want a tragedy to happen, and so then it becomes extremely important for your kids to obey you the first time you say something. Well, then that sets up things that, you make mistakes and how you handle those things, and then your kids get to be adults, and then they start having conversations with you that you have to say sorry for, and it's like it goes in every direction. But the to not go on autopilot and make assumptions. One thing that probably is not helpful for someone who's trying to say yes to Jesus, for someone back home, out of concern, try to give you advice for how not to get persecuted.
Yeah.
That's really aggravating.
Yeah, because I think, I like this analogy. We're in a war. We're not in a battle.
We are in a war.
We're not in a battle. We're in a war. And you can lose a battle but win the war. But you can win a battle and lose the war.
Straight up.
And so you have to understand, if I have a military background, every successful campaign, right now we have several wars raging throughout the world, right? But every successful campaign that says we won the war has a series of lost battles along the way, right? And so
Yep.
Persecution is this reality that, yes, we are going to win the war, but there are going to be some battles that we're going to lose. And that is not because we were stupid. It's not because it's the cost of warfare. The cost of warfare is some battles are lost. There's attrition, there's suffering, there are tears, but our life is not defined by a lost battle. Our life is defined by the war that we win.
Yes, and we stand on the promises of God.
Absolutely.
Psalm 91 is a thing. But if someone gets taken or tortured or killed, it's not God not being faithful to Psalm 91.
Yeah.
And there's a paradox there, and some people don't get how does that work? You know, like when he asked us to do these mass evangelism campaigns in Nicaragua, I did understand the risk. Like, I know the history of the Cold War and the Soviet Union and what communism is done. If you are out there and you can't figure out whether communism and socialism is a good thing, you need to ask, you need to research and read. If you're too young to know what that is, I'm just telling you, communism is from hell, and so is socialism. It equals no good result.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's Antichrist.
it is antichrist. There are philosophical things that they claim that seem noble and good and right, but they never end up in a positive end.
Yeah.
And so I knew, because I grew up during the Cold War and nuclear fallout shelters, but the Soviet Union collapsed as a superpower, but their influence in the world didn't. And so all the stories, missionaries used to come. Brother Andrew, all of his stories, I went to lots of his. If you don't know who that is, he was probably the most famous Bible smuggler for a long time. And then all of these stories about the suffering church and persecution and all of these other ideological Islam and communism and all these things, and how it responds to freedom in the gospel. And so I understood, even going to Nicaragua in 2013, this is a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they have this recent history of kind of going toward democracy and free elections and everything, or whatever. They had some of those and they made advances. But all of a sudden, things are kind of eroding there. And we're making trips down there, and then we sent missionaries to live there. And every time we're going in and out, there's plane loads of youth groups all dressed in the same T-shirt going, because, man, the door opened, and there's been lots of focus gospel work in Nicaragua, and that's wonderful.
You mean to tell me that not every country on the planet is just asking Christians to come and freely, unopposed, share the gospel? Right?
Right.
I mean, this is the reality of the majority world. We go knowing we're going to be opposed.
Oh, yeah.
But that doesn't stop our going.
Yes, like I'm connected.
And it's not foolishness.
I'm connected to people that do things underground, and the church is on fire, and other parts of the world, and they don't need a public platform. And we have them in our ministry, and we have inside Mountain Gateway big networks of churches on the other side of the earth that I don't ever talk about.
Correct.
Because, particularly now, I have this big public platform that makes it easy to identify me, my name, my face, and everything. And we're kind of dealing with that because of this situation in Nicaragua. And so God asked us to do these mass evangelism campaigns. Never had done any. We've been church planting people in villages, small contact villages, and now I'm going to do something totally opposite. We're life on life disciple makers, 30 years of ministry doing this. Well, what? Like, I'm not even sure if I, in some ways, philosophically agree with a mass crusade or evangelistic campaign. What happens about the fellowship? The follow up? What happens? Like all the, What happens to the multitudes that are making decisions for
But
Christ?
here's what I like, Britt.
That's a different question, you know?
Jesus didn't ask you. He asked you for your yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're like, Lord, I want all the details before I say yes. And Lord's like, I don't need you to. I'm not debating with you.
I had to eat some thoughts and words about crusades, about mass meetings, you know, because Jesus is like, here's what I want you to do. Really? Yes. I mean, it was undeniable.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do? Well, I don't believe in telling the king no. And so I factored, I know, well, we got permission. We did everything that we could to demonstrate honor and respect to the government. They said yes. We had 8 meetings. We had 8 mass evangelism campaigns starting at the end of February 2023, and it stretched into early November. The first 5 we did every other week. God, here's what God told me. I've decided to do something in Nicaragua that no one can stop. I am going to shake this entire nation, and the eye of the world is going to turn and look at this little bitty insignificant country, the size of the state of Alabama with 6.8 million people in it. And I don't know, like I'm like everybody else. If the Lord asks you to do something, you want it to succeed.
Of course.
You know, if I lay hands on the sick person, I want the sick person to get healed. We've seen thousands of people healed in miracles, but probably tens of thousands where we don't know, did that happen or did that not happen? So we want to succeed, right? If the Lord is like saying to you, you want to do, hey, go do this, set up a tent on the corner and do this. You want it to like explode and just, even though your yes is not predicated on whether that happens or not. But I mean, if I'm going to do a mass evangelism campaign, I want lots of people to come, right? That's just honest.
Yeah.
I didn't know if lots of people were going to come. Well, lots of people came. Every space that we got, God filled it up with desperate people. He sees the entire nation. We had over 1 million people come to those 8 meetings, across all those meetings. They were not 1 million different people. It was about 650,000 different individuals because they were multi-night events. They were 2-night events, except for the first one. If you count the high attendance night on all the 8 campaigns, it's about 650,000. But total attendance was over 1 million, right? Well, if you're stirring 1 million people in a country that has 6 million people, 6.8 million people in it, and at our high water mark was we had 10,000 volunteers working. We had 3,000 buses running, at 3,200 buses running for the campaign in the capital city. We had all this structure. The Lord did. We saw the Lord do a miracle. We saw him unify 6,000 evangelical churches. Virtually every single evangelical church of any substance in the country rose up, unified, and started working together. And the social media cycle was seized. The news cycle was seized. Press conferences, high profile. There's no way to hide that, right? And the government was saying to us, everything's good, we're happy. They had their reasons, whatever. I know what God was doing. I know what they would say. I know some of what they said and why they wanted us there, but I know what God told me. And I have a high suspicion that we're going to find out in heaven that God blinded the authorities and made them do what he wanted to do for the time frame that he wanted to do. Then he moved their hands because they just went from, you are the greatest thing since sliced bread and you're being a blessing. You're calming the country. You are helping us heal the wounds.
And overnight, the switch flipped.
Oh, buddy.
right?
It switched like that, and they then used the what was favor as a shield to try to capture me and my son and put us in prison.
Yeah.
And they started arresting our team, our main team. We had a husband and wife team that got arrested, and then a total we had 11 pastors or ministers arrested, and our 2 Nicaraguan lawyers who were helping us comply with Nicaraguan law.
And that is persecution.
That's persecution.
That's not suffering.
No, that's not suffering.
There is suffering in it, but that is persecution.
They flipped a switch, and they decided we're going after these people. We are going to this gospel influence. This is a threat to us, our regime, and they feared that myself or someone else could utilize everything that was there to turn it into a movement to overthrow the government. And it's a dictatorship, and so everything was fine until it was not fine. And they don't telegraph to you when things are not fine, and they're trying to trap you and do all the things. And so they started arresting our people, and they tortured some of them in order to get them to help them lay a trap for me and my son. Us, people in my family. They wouldn't hesitate to do whatever with whoever. And they refused to give us up and to participate in a plan, because we had 13 more of these campaigns planned for 2024 with full permission and full planning, and the team was out working, and they just put a sledgehammer through all of our administration, all of our organization. They seized all of our assets. We had we had postured ourselves from 2013 to bless the country. We got a coffee farm where we were doing what we could to help marginalized villages and give people a job and pay them a fair wage, and we were responding to natural disasters, and we had a warehouse for staging natural disaster response, and heavy haul trucks for food distribution, and tractors, and that we used for other things than just that. But a natural disaster would come, and we deployed the tractor one time to clear landslides off the road to help the government open up the things. And we had a boat built so that we could run rivers to remote villages to haul food, and then building supplies and tools and seeds to help people get back on their feet after hurricanes, because Nicaragua's in the path. It often gets smashed. Every few years there's something, or there's an earthquake that's happened in past years. It's just, we were just there to help.
It's interesting,
and they seized all of our assets.
It's an interesting, observation, at least from my perspective, because at the beginning of the 1900s, the World Missions Council met, and they said, what is the number one thing the global church should focus on? And at that time, they said to take the gospel to the ends of the earth. In 2008, the same, council, obviously not the same individuals, but the same council met and said, what should be the focus of the global church? And they said humanitarian aid. Mm. And the impetus to take the gospel was replaced by the desire to deliver humanitarian aid.
The definition for what the Great Commission meant had changed.
And here's the thing. We certainly can use humanitarian aid to get access to a country. But we should never lose focus that is just an access point. That is not the goal.
Yeah, we do it. We've done it a lot.
We all do it.
We all do it. It's the proper response.
Yeah.
Right. But it can't be the tip of our spear.
Yeah.
We are not going to eradicate poverty.
No.
This side of the second coming of Jesus.
Well, it's unbiblical. I will just say that.
It's unbiblical. And Jesus said, the poor you will have always with you.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't respond to the poor. Don't talk to me about responding to the poor. Let's line up what you've done and what we've done directly to help the poor and responding to disasters. I can talk to you about that, but it's not the tip of our spear.
Yeah. It's the gateway.
It's not even the gateway. We go first with the gospel. We're first concerned about people so here's the thing. The premise that I have to fill someone's belly or fix their teeth in order for them to be open to the gospel is a lie.
Yeah. Well,
The question is this: can someone with rotten teeth go to hell? And can someone with clean teeth go to hell? Well, the answer is yes. I'm not against helping people learn hygiene. Can a starving person go to heaven?
yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. I don't want anybody to starve. Not going to tolerate it around me. I'm going to, by compulsion, deal with it. But my first concern is eternal.
Yeah.
Period. And they are not equistat in the same. It's like there's so many. It's a thing. We've talked about this, Riaan, that ministries head into responding to human suffering, right, through humanitarian aid and social things. And they are first a gospel entity, and then they are trying to respond. They feel bad. They want to be more effective, so they start feeding programs or whatever they do. And then it's such a black hole that it overwhelms all purposes, and not always. There's some great organizations out there that keep it in balance long term and have for years. But there are organizations out there that were Great Commission gospel preaching entities that started responding humanitarianly, and the humanitarian mandate to fix a problem, to make it go away, overtook their Great Commission mandate, and they no longer preach the gospel. And they have no exit strategy because they can't end it.
Well, because it's
not possible to fix it.
We have to decide what is the engine and what is the wagon.
That's right.
If the gospel is the engine, then the wagon of humanitarian aid is a necessary part of the gospel.
Yes.
But if humanitarian aid becomes the engine, the wagon of the gospel gets unhitched like that.
It does.
It's just a fact.
It is in missiology a phenomenon that has happened often enough to where it's a thing.
Yeah, I remember and I'll close with this. The Wall Street Journal ran an article, and we know the Wall Street Journal is not necessarily the most pro-Christian news outlet. But they did a study in Honduras, and they followed two NGOs that went to Honduras to build houses. One NGO was just a secular NGO building houses, and one was a church that went and built houses. And they interviewed the locals, and they said, how can you tell the difference between these two? And they said, we can't. And the Wall Street Journal said, quote, it would behoove the church to tell people why they're there, because the local individuals cannot make the connection and connect the dots on their own, but it would behoove the church to say when they come to build a house in the name of Christ, that
Yes.
is why they're there. The Wall Street Journal made the observation.
Like I 100% get preaching without demonstrated lifestyle. Nobody wants that. Everybody gripes about that. That is a bad thing.
Yeah.
But lifestyle without preaching is equally as bad. That whole thing where I don't say anything, I'm just going to shine my light, quote unquote. That's not shining your light.
Yeah.
That's just being a good neighbor or whatever. And people, it's by the foolishness of preaching that the kingdom advances. Like we have to marry the two together.
Yeah.
And the whole role for signs and wonders and the power of God, sometimes there is a valid, again, I want to overstate, there is a mandate from God and a valid reason to respond to human suffering.
Yeah.
It's the right thing to do. I do it regularly, personally and in our ministry. And we've invested significant resources in that. Right? But the proclamation of the gospel with bold yeses with the rod of the power of God in our hands for signs, wonders, miracle, and healing is the tip of our spear. And then we respond. We don't ever want our humanitarian response to encroach upon or replace the rod of the power of God that's in our hand. So I'm not going to go first with a medical clinic. I'm not against medical clinics at all, or a dental clinic. The first thing I'm going to do is lay my hands on the rotten teeth and believe God to fix the teeth supernaturally. And the why is there's no end to the power of God. There are an end to human resources.
Well, and that's the thing, right? I mean, we can just close with this statement. Humanitarian aid is temporal. The gospel is eternal.
And we need to engage with both of those.
What do you want to give people?
That's right.
Eternal life, and you accompany temporal relief with eternal
Amen.
life. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Please join us in our next episode. If you have any questions, comments that you want to share with us, please email us at gatewaytomercy@mountaingateway.org. Look forward to seeing you next time. Hey, thank you so much for watching the Gateway to Mercy podcast. We truly appreciate you watching and contributing. So please like, subscribe, comment, and let us know what you think of the podcast, and share with your friends. Invite others to watch this podcast. We are really motivated to see the gospel move forward to the ends of the earth. So if you have questions, email us at gatewaytomercy@mountaingateway.org. God bless.